The word iota has two distinct meanings. As a noun, 1. A tiny or scarcely detectable amount. 2. The ninth letter of the Greek alphabet.
Good morning and welcome to IoTA. It is Wednesday, September 7th, 2016. I'm Tony Lynn. IoTA is a daily news podcast focused on the Internet of Things industry and a lot of times Atlanta and whatever else. Before we get started today, the past couple of days I've been going through the amount of news stories that have been coming out, and the news stories have actually been shrinking over the last couple of weeks, which I kind of expected. The fact that we hit this nice boom during the summer and it's going to start to tail off during Q4 and it'll probably pick up again around Q1. So I'm starting to debate a little bit about maybe changing the format a little bit. The show itself actually takes me about 2 hours every day to produce, meaning I have to research the stories, have to document the stories, and then of course do the podcast. So I'm thinking about maybe actually moving this to weekly, at least in the short term, as we go through the Q4 downturn of information, and maybe focus on a little bit of a longer show instead of it being 10 to 15 minutes. Instead, maybe make it 30 to 45, but maybe bring in some guest host, whatever else I can do to make this a little bit more enjoyable. Now, I'm digging the daily format. It's just I don't know that I can keep it up the way it's going. Also, my day job is taking off as well. So just note that we may be a little bit unstable for the next week or so as I work on this new format. But I'm really thinking that, and certainly we want to get to start focusing a little bit more on the interviews that I've been trying to put into place, and those actually take probably as much work as the podcast itself. Anyway, enough complaining, or not really complaining, but enough about me. Let's get started with the stories of the day. All right, stories of the day. There's only really two that I wanted to report on. Everything else didn't really have a lot of there was a lot of PR press releases, but none of them really said anything, and those are just not worthwhile to me. So IoT LoRaWAN network goes live in Sydney. So you guys remember we met Vinke Geisman from the Netherlands, who actually kind of started this whole process, and he was here in Atlanta to talk about what they were doing in an attempt to try to get Atlanta onto the system as well. Well, here's another success story for him, is that the low power, long range IoT network is now available within a 5-kilometer radius of Barangaroo in Sydney, operating on a 915 megahertz spectrum band and able to support up to 1,000 devices. This is phenomenal. All right, so let me read a little bit about the story. So one of the first live Internet of Things networks in Australia has been launched in Sydney with a network-based low power, low range LoRaWAN open standard. The Barangaroo Community Network activated on Tuesday afternoon by the Communications Minister Mitch Fifield during an IoT Alliance Australia event. Operates in the 915 industrial and scientifically allocated spectrum band, which is currently used for consumer devices operating under low interference potential devices, LIPD class licenses. I guess they have some issues there with the provisioning as well. Those within 3 to 5 kilometers of the network will be able to connect IoT devices for free. For the purposes of prototyping, testing, and developing solutions, with the IoT gateway able to support up to 1,000 devices at a time. The Internet of Things has potential to transform a wide range of Australian sectors, from agriculture to aged care, by placing sensors in everyday objects that can send and receive data. This data can be then analyzed and used to increase the efficiency of services and develop new applications, Fifield said. He continues, the government is committed to working with industry and realize the full potential of IoT technologies and to ensure Australia takes a leadership role in this area. Congratulations, Sydney. Welcome to the party. Let me see. So the IoTAA, which emerged from the Communications Alliance IoT think tank earlier this year, has forecasted the IoT industry to add about Australian 120 billion to the Australian economy by 2025. This represents an uplift of up to 2% of Australia's GDP across a range of environments, including factories, retail outlets, smart cities and homes, motor vehicles, other transport modes, and even human health and fitness. IoT is a pervasive disruptor, John Stetton, Communications Alliance CEO and chair of the IoTAA Executive Council, stated. So I think this is a phenomenal win. Now, just just imagine that the last we reported on LoRaWAN, they were already in like 100 cities worldwide. They were in, I can't remember, like 31 countries. And as this becomes more and more widespread, and even though it's fairly highly concentrated in cities, just because of the nature of the way that it works, if enough cities start to put this in place, then you really start to get the idea of smart cities without having to worry about the traditional carriers. And although I don't think AT&T and Verizon are really concerned about it just yet, I think they probably should be. All right, moving on to my only other story of the day, and this one is interesting. So it comes from Naked Security, and Paul Ducklin writes that more IoT and security, the routers that take instructions from anyone. So this is not a direct IoT story, but it's about security, and it's about the routers that you have in your house. So let's talk about this. So you may not have heard of TR069, more properly known as CWMP, short for CPE WAN Management Protocol. But you may have a router that's got it. CPE is the internet provider jargon for customer premises equipment. It refers to the part of your network to ISP connection that's in your home or work, where the ISP can't get physical access to it unless you say so. Historically and understandably, there's been a little bit of support nightmare for ISPs because there are usually a lot of innocent looking configuration settings in the average router that can cause trouble if you mess with them. And Lord knows I've got neighbors that have done that. As a result, some ISPs provide you with the actual CPE hardware, often for a fee that's part of your service, and you have to run the gear they send you. And some ISPs offer you a pre-configured router, often quite cheaply to get you started, which you get to keep, but you can upgrade to a router of your own choice later if you like. And other ISPs require you to buy your own router and set it up yourself, although they only officially support devices from a short list that they've green-lighted. Regardless of how you acquire your router, there are still some hurdles that remains before you can get online property, configuring a router to the right settings, and updating the necessary firmware to keep up to date. So automatically configuring your router is where CWMP comes in. The word WAN in CWMP is short for wide area network, which means the stuff outside of your router. So loosely speaking, CWMP works using the HTTP-based protocol so that your router connects outward from your home network, just like a browser. Your CPE device fetches its latest security configurations from what's called an auto configuration server, an ACS, from your ISP. So here's where the security comes in. So the connection must be confidential, otherwise crooks could eavesdrop on your router and find out important security secrets. And the connection must be authenticated. Otherwise, again, an imposter can set up a server somewhere between you and the router and, send bogus instructions to it. HTTPS, which is the secure version of HTTP, is a solution used by CWMP, and it provides both confidentiality and authentication if done correctly. However, it mostly isn't. So Finnish security researcher Harry Sintonen, who goes by Piru, recently found a serious hole in a CWMP implementation and a numerous router models from Swedish company Intino. Now, this is not specifically about the States, but the States does use this protocol, and therefore, there's some issues here. So according to Sintonen's vulnerability disclosure, he tried hard to persuade Nintendo to do something about the problem, but they didn't, so he ended up going public. And this is what he writes. The operator that sells CPE to end users or runs their services over it should request a software update from Nintendo. Nintendo do not do, God, I don't know who wrote this, but this is horrible. We only sell through operators. So basically what he's saying, to paraphrase this poorly written sentence, that the ISP, in case, completely controls what's going on and has no intention on letting the users update it or whatever. So anyway, the problem is that the CPE, so here's the problem. So the CPE will call home for whatever purpose. So what you need to be able to do is need to pre-configure the router so that it only accepts HTTPS requests from from right certificates, but they don't come out of the box that way. It sometimes will just call out randomly to, or you can force it to call out, and if it's not sort of pre-configured to go to the right location, then you have an issue. Let me just see real quick if there's anything else in here that we really should talk about. So let's segue this to the States a little bit. So in my area here in Atlanta, mostly it's Comcast. And of course, Comcast has their Xfinity service, and they ship you this nice little, router that does a little bit of everything. It has dual band Wi-Fi inside of it, mainly because it has one that is for the public, or basically anyone who has access to Comcast systems, so that if I go over to a friend's house, I can still use basically a public Wi-Fi within their location. The unfortunate part is it's still within the same box. And in those cases where something like this is not maintained correctly, and basically Comcast controls all these things. Anytime you have a problem, Comcast will remotely go in and sort of reconfigure everything for you unless you lock them out. And I tend to lock them out if I can, just because I don't really like anyone controlling my stuff. But this is how they're doing it. They're using this protocol to pull it off. And for the most part, I think Comcast is pretty secure. They've got this, really locked in. But it wouldn't take a whole lot to do a man-in-the-middle attack to basically spoof some of these things and be able to take control of someone's network. Now, I'm not saying it's happened. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's just from the fact that this is how these things happen. And so from an IoT perspective, it would be with the insecurity that already exists within IoT devices. If an IoT is actually on one of these systems, then it might be a possibility to go in and do some malicious damage. Anyway, that's all we're going to say about that. Just note that everything that you do in IoT, you should be thinking and focusing on how do you make it secure, and don't just rely on the fact that your device is now secure, but the things that it connects to may not be, and what do you need to do about that? All right, so that's it for today. I'm not certain how our shows are going to play out for the rest of the week. Again, there's going to be a little bit of instability. We'll figure this out as we go, but I'm still committed to this thing. We're having a great time. I just got to figure out a way to make it a little bit more interactive and a little bit more interesting as the news cycle is, well, let's do a little bit of this. Anyway, so anytime if you want to send me any feedback, particularly about the new format that we might be doing, email me at tonamock@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at tonamock. If you want to just check out anything else I might be doing, it's again at tonamock.com. If you want to try to help us, focus the show a little bit more, and, feel free to help support it. And if with support, actually would give me a little bit more leeway to do some other things that we might want to do. And you can go to patreon.com/tonamock for that. Otherwise, guys and girls, I hope you're doing some really cool stuff in IoT, and I would love to hear about it. Please let me know. But until tomorrow, or until the next time, have a good day.